Al Sharpton stood at the pulpit at Center Pointe Church, looked out at a room full of grieving family and stone-faced strangers, and said this. He said he was not on that island by himself. Somebody saw something and knows something, and then he did something no other national voice has done in this case yet. He put 3 specific questions on the sheriff's desk. 3, and every one of them is a question the sheriff has not answered. I want to walk you through the 3 questions tonight, not the way the news walked you through them, in a soft summary at the bottom of an article. The way Sharpton walked the room through them, slowly, one at a time, because when you hear them slowly, in the order he asked them, you understand why this case is not going to close quietly. Question 1, the phone. Nolan Wells' phone was not with Nolan Wells. Let me say that again because I need it to land. His phone was not on his body. His phone was not in the water. His phone was not on Horn Island. His phone was at a friend's house. Here is how his mother knows this. Christine Wansley shared her location with her son. That is what a lot of parents do when their kid goes off to college. You share your location so if something goes wrong, you know where to look. That is a normal, loving thing. That is a mother trying to keep her son safe from 150 miles away. On the night of July 4th, Christine watched her son's phone move. Not her son, his phone. The dot on her screen left Horn Island. The dot came back across the water. The dot did not go home. The dot went to a house that belonged to one of the friends who was on the boat that day. Imagine that for a second. You are a mother. You are worried. You cannot reach your child. You open the app. You see the dot. And the dot is at a house that is not your son's, and the person at that house is not answering, and your son is not with the dot. That is the moment your stomach falls through the floor. That is question 1. Why was his phone at a friend's house and not on him? Because if he drowned by accident, if this was a swimming trip that went bad, the phone should have been on the boat or on the beach or in the water. It should not have made it back to a house in Ocean Springs while the person it belonged to was still missing in the Gulf. Sharpton did not soften that question. He asked it out loud in a church with the sheriff's early statement in his other hand. Why was the phone somewhere the boy was not? Question 2, the keys, same story. His car keys were also with the friends, not with him, not in the water, not left on the beach next to a towel. His keys were in someone else's pocket at that same house, along with his phone. Now think through that for a full minute. If Nolan Wells was going to leave Horn Island on his own, in his own car, and drive himself home, he would need his keys. He would need his phone. He would need at least one of those 2 things. He had neither. So the group who came back from that island came back with his car keys in their hand. That means one of 2 things. Either Nolan knew he was not coming back the same way he came and gave his keys to a friend to hold, which does not match anything anyone has said about his mood or his plans. Or, and this is the harder one to say, the group left the island already knowing he was not with them and knowing his keys were not with him. That is not a mistake you make. That is not a detail you forget. That is not the kind of thing a group of friends leaves a marina without noticing. You do not drive away from a boat launch with your friend's keys in your pocket by accident. You just do not. Somebody at some point that evening made a decision to leave without him and to leave with his stuff. That is question 2. Why were the keys with the friends and not with Nolan? Question 3, the 911 call that never came. Now this is the one that hurts to say. The friends did not call the police. Read that sentence again. The friends did not call the police that night. His mother did. Let that sink in. You have a young man who is missing. You are the last people who saw him. You are the people who came back from the same trip he did not come back from. You have his phone, you have his keys, and you do not call 911. Christine Wansley made the call, not a friend, not a boatmate, not somebody on that island. His mother from home opened her phone, made the call, and started the search herself. Timeline matters here. The order matters. The order is mother calls first. Everyone else follows. Every single second between the moment Nolan was last seen alive and the moment his mother dialed those 3 numbers is a second that nobody on that boat used to sound an alarm. Sharpton stood in that pulpit and said, why did they not call? That is the entire question. It is such a simple question, and there is no answer that makes the group look innocent. There is not one. Try to write one in your head. Try to think of a version of that night where a group of friends comes back to shore without their friend, has his phone, has his keys, and does not think to dial 911. You cannot get there without either panic that lasted for hours or a coordinated silence that lasted for hours. Neither one looks good. That is the 3-question checklist: phone, keys, 911. Every one of them has a physical, checkable answer. Every one of them is on the desk of Sheriff Mike Ledbetter of Jackson County, Mississippi. And every one of them, 3 weeks in, has not been publicly explained by the people who could answer them. Not by the friends, not by their parents, not by their lawyers, not by the sheriff's office in a follow-up statement. Nobody has stood in front of a camera and said, here is why the phone was there. Here is why the keys were there. Here is why we did not call. 3 weeks of silence on 3 simple questions. Now I need to talk to you about the moment inside that eulogy that changed the temperature of the whole country. Because Sharpton did not just ask 3 questions, he did something else. In the middle of his eulogy, in a Mississippi sanctuary in the year 2026, he said 2 names out loud, Emmett Till, Medgar Evers. I need older viewers to hear me right now. You know what those names mean. You know what it means when a national civil rights leader stands in a Mississippi church and puts those 2 names on the same page as a 19-year-old wide receiver who was just found dead in the water. You know exactly what he was saying and exactly what he was calling out. Emmett Till was 14 years old when he was killed in Mississippi in 1955, and his body was found in a river. Medgar Evers was a civil rights leader, shot in his own driveway in Jackson, Mississippi in 1963. To put Nolan Wells' name next to those 2 names in a Mississippi church in front of a national audience is not a small thing. That is Sharpton saying, this case is not new, this case is not isolated, this case fits a pattern this state has never fully answered for. That is a very heavy sentence, and he chose to say it with the whole country listening. For our older viewers, that hit different, because you remember, or your parents remember, or your grandparents remember. You know the taste of a Mississippi story where a young man went into the water and the answer came back thin. You have heard that story before. You have lived next to that story before. And when Sharpton says those names, he is not just talking to 2026, he is talking to 1955 and 1963, and every year in between where a family in this country waited for an answer that did not come. That is why this eulogy became national news within 6 hours. Not the money, not the reward, the names, because the names did the work no press release could do. Now look at who was in that room. Because the room itself is telling you where public opinion has already landed on this case. Spike Lee was there. Terrell Owens was there. Tyler Perry was there. Ben Crump, Al Sharpton, members of the Congressional Black Caucus. This is not a random collection of famous people. This is a coordinated group. This is what happens when a case has already been decided in the court of public opinion, even if it has not been decided in a court of law yet. When Spike Lee shows up to a funeral in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, that means something. When Terrell Owens flies down to stand behind a family from Southwest Mississippi Community College, that means something. When Tyler Perry writes a $50,000 check and stands in the sanctuary while it is announced, that means something. When members of Congress sit in the pews, that means something. It means the perception has moved. The perception is no longer, this might be a swimming accident. The perception is, this is a case, and we are not going to let it be closed as anything less than one. The sheriff's early statement, the one that said there was no foul play, was the spark that made all of this catch fire. Sharpton called it out directly. He said, and I want you to hear this line one more time because it is the sharpest one of the night. We cannot have someone in law enforcement saying there was no foul play before there was an investigation. Let me translate that in plain words. You do not get to say the case is closed before you have opened it. You do not get to give people an answer before you have looked for one. You do not get to make a public statement that the water did this before you have examined the body properly, checked the phone, run toxicology, interviewed the friends under oath, and looked at every foot of that island. And when you do say those words too soon, you do not just hurt this case, you hurt every future case. Because now every family in Jackson County that ever loses a child in unclear circumstances is going to hear the same phrase in the back of their head, no foul play. Said too fast, said too easy, said before anybody actually knew. That is the wound Sharpton was pressing on, and that is why he closed the eulogy the way he did, with a chant led by Ben Crump. Nolan's life mattered. The whole room said it. Nolan's life mattered. Say it out loud in your car right now if you have to. Nolan's life mattered. I want to bring this back to the 3 questions before I let you go, because the 3 questions are the reason I made this video. And the 3 questions are the reason you are still watching. Phone, keys, 911. Every one of those has a real answer. Every one of those answers exists in the memory of the people who came back from Horn Island on the 4th of July. Every one of those answers could be given tomorrow morning. There is no forensic delay. There is no lab. There is no wait. All you have to do is say what happened. That is what the sheriff has been asking for. That is what the FBI is now looking into on the interstate threats side. That is what the joint phone review agreed to by Ben Crump and the Jackson County District Attorney is going to try to pull out of the device itself. And here is where I hand it to you. Because Sharpton was clear, this case is not going to be decided by the sheriff. This case is going to be decided by public pressure, by media, and by whichever friend on that boat wakes up one morning and decides they cannot carry it anymore. Which means every share of this video, every comment, every subscribe is part of that pressure. That is not a slogan. That is how modern cases actually move. Silence keeps a case cold. Noise keeps a case warm. So I want to end where he ended. Nolan's life mattered. His phone was not with him. His keys were not with him. His friends did not call. And the sheriff said there was no foul play before there was an investigation. You are the jury tonight. Comment which of the 3 questions bothers you the most. The phone, the keys, the call that never came. Which one, if it was your child, would you never be able to let go of? Subscribe for the autopsy drop this morning at 8 a.m. Central out of Chicago. Turn on the bell so you do not miss the moment the folder opens. And keep this case warm, because a case only stays alive as long as the people watching refuse to let it go quiet.